Down our timeline in our cinema machine to make our gameplay. We've got the right light choices and light quality, and now we want to lift the final result with some full screen effects. Who's used the post-processing stack here? Just a couple of people. Okay. I'm going to be talking about the version 2 of that, but a lot of what I say is going to apply to both because we've just added some features rather than completely replaced what's going on. So for those who don't know, our post-processing stack is something we introduced 6 months or so ago. It replaces the cinematic image effects which people may have used in the past. They had some issues. One of the ones was efficiency. Every time you put a new image effect on, it would be another full pass through the screen, which was quite expensive. So the post-processing stack is an Uber shader, which means when you select everything you want to do, it puts that all into one enormous shader. When it wants to do the full screen effect, it grabs the screen, runs through, and applies it all in one shot. So it's more efficient. The other thing we've done is just add, I suppose, we've been quite influenced by film color grading techniques and this kind of stuff, and we've started to implement some of that sort of stuff. It's still stuff, honestly, I'm wrapping my head around, so I'd love to, I'm slowly learning more about this, but it's a really, it's given us a lot more power for how we color grade and how we tone map and how we do a whole bunch of different stuff. So it's been really great. A couple of things that post-processing stack didn't have is it didn't let you write custom effects. And the other one, was very hard to change an effect. So if you put something on a camera, an effect on a camera, and you wanted to change something when you went outdoors, then you had to find some way of blending between them or doing something like that. So we've been working on a second version. So if you want the first version of post-processing stack, just go to the asset store and download it. It's free. The second version, or version 2, is on GitHub. So this is considered to be in beta, so don't use it on any release project you're going to do, or buyer beware for projects. Still very much a work in progress. And it adds custom shaders and it adds the concept of volumes as well. So you can apply an effect within a certain volume, and then when you move to a different volume, it will blend nicely between the two different things. So what I'm going to do today is show you how to create those volumes, how to create the stack in version 2. But it's similar to version 1, and then we'll just try a few different effects and see what we can do. The demo we're working with today is this apartment demo. So this is ArcViz Pro Asset Pack, Volume 3 from the Asset Store. So we've just downloaded that, put together this apartment. This has no full screen effects on it at the moment, so you can see some aliasing issues and things like that. And we'll start adding some effects in, and we'll go through the lounge room. But it's already quite a nice result for just grabbing some assets from the asset store. There we go. So as the first step, let's go into the living room here and just find out how we can add our effects. And then we'll dig into some volumes. So in version 1 of the post-processing stack, if you wanted to add an effect, you'd go to your camera and you'd click on Add Component, and there's just one component you need to add. Now there's 2 components you need to do to get something happening. So I'm on the camera now. I'm going into the rendering component, and there are 2 components here: the post-processing layer and the post-processing volume. So the layer is the one that belongs on the camera. I'll put that on the camera, and let's have a look at the options for that. So this is the volume blending that I just mentioned before, and we'll go a bit more into how that works, but at the moment there's going to be a trigger. This is the thing that's going to change from volume to volume as this moves around the world space. It's going to change from volume to volume. It's just the camera at the moment, because it makes sense when a camera moves to a different volume, it blends to that effect. And the other thing is the layer. So I've created a new post-processing layer here. When it's looking for volumes, it's going to look for volumes on that layer. It's just an efficiency thing. So just create a new layer, put some volumes, which are just cube colliders or whatever you'd like them to be on that layer, and they'll transition between them. We've kept anti-aliasing on the camera, so you won't blend between those. You'll just choose one and stick to it. I'll turn on temporal anti-aliasing for this demo. We've also kept ambient occlusion on the main camera as well, so I'll enable that. Some extra things that we've added here is the ability to export a frame. So for people who are into color grading, this is useful for when you're generating lookup tables for color grading. So you might export a frame, adjust it in another program to be how you'd like it to do, and then export those changes so you can say, I want that color to become that color. So you can export a frame as an EXR. And then, as I mentioned, we also have custom effects that you can add as well, and here's where you say how you'd like those to be applied in which order. So we've added the post-processing layer to the camera. I'll just go into the scene here, pop out a little bit. And so what I've done is I've already defined these colliders in the scene, which are going to be the volumes I'm going to be working with. But the first thing we want to do before we start working with the volumes is just apply a global post-processing effect that applies to everything. So maybe a key change from 1 to 2 is the idea now that rather than just having one effect we apply, we can actually stack and blend between and override effects. So what we're going to do now is create a global effect that applies all the time, and then as we move into the volumes, we can choose to override specific parts of that effect. So on this global object here, which has no volume, I'm going to click on Add Component, go to Rendering, and click on Post-Process Volume. So this is the second component we need. Remember, 2 components, one's layer and one's volume. This one I'm going to click is global. So that means it doesn't exist within the volume. This is just on all the time. So you'd have one of those in a scene. We have a weight for how much this is applied, so you can scale effects in and out if you'd like to. A priority, because we're going to override effects here, so we want to know if we've got multiple effects in action, which one should I be using? And a profile. So this idea was introduced in version 1 of the post-processing stack. This idea of we're not going to do our setup in here directly. We're going to create an asset. So what I've done when I've clicked that button is I've actually created a new file that's part of my project. And I can edit it up here, or I can edit it here, but the idea is it's an asset that I can share. So sometimes when I'm doing this sort of demo, I go to the Atom demo and I grab the post-processing profile from that, put it in here and apply it to the scene, and you get that gritty film look. Just means once you've defined a look for your game and you've got that, you don't want to kind of keep copying and pasting components to make that happen. You just want to have that asset and keep reapplying it wherever you go. So you can share that file around. Okay, so we've got a global effect here. I'm going to go back into our scene and let's see what sort of effects we can add. So I have the custom effect that I wrote before, this grayscale effect, and then the ones that so far are given to you. Now I mentioned this is in beta, so it means we haven't ported over all of our effects yet. This is the current list that we've got. What should we apply first? Well, everyone loves bloom, right? We're all gamers. Well, we're not actually. But anyway, let's put some bloom on. I'll stay in this interface for a second more before I go and show you the effect. We have an on and off switch here. That will switch bloom on and off globally for the entire scene. So when we have different volumes or whatever, it'll just switch bloom off and everything. You can also enable and disable bloom here, and that will enable it just for this profile, just for this one. So there's 2 ways to enable and disable. And again, there's this idea of we're overriding. So everything here, even though we switched on bloom, everything here is grayed out by default. So I need to actually turn something on. So let's turn on the intensity. And we'll just scale this up. Get a little bit of, you can see the bloom happening there on the wall there. That's nice. What else can we apply? Let's add, why don't I add the color grading? The color grading component is probably the biggest and most complex component. And this is the one that parts of it I'm definitely still wrapping my head around. There are things that are quite obvious here, like temperature. So in this room here, it's a lounge room, right? We're going to make it want to feel warm and inviting. So I can override the temperature and up that a little bit, and you can see everything become a little bit more orange. We can start to play with exposure here as well. So let's, I might just turn that one off there. Hue, shift, saturation, contrast. So I'll increase the contrast a little bit to make everything a little more pop a little bit more. So I'm a programmer here, so don't blame me for odd looks you're going to get out of his. Now these trackballs here, these are the ones I really need to wrap my head around. This is a kind of film color grading concept. A DaVinci Resolve and those sorts of programs have this sort of concept of where I can have lift, gamma, gain, and I can start playing around with this. One I really love is these grading curves. So I can actually change hue versus hue, hue versus saturation, saturation versus saturation, or luminance versus saturation. So for example, in this scene here, I'll just pop out a little bit. I might decide that green is a little bit overwhelming, maybe certain colors. The Atom demo is a good one for this with the red pants. They really kind of hurt your eyes and you go like, oh, that's too much. I'd like to desaturate the greens, right? I can jump into, I've got a hue versus saturation thing here. I'll come in and I'll click override so it's active. Jump in and I'm going to add some keys. And then what I can do is I can start pulling that down and just desaturating certain ranges of color within my game, or experience. So the plant there, it's a bit of a subtle effect. I'll turn this, you can see the green there. That's one better, so the green, now just that green. I can do that on luminance as well, so I might have bright spots that I want to saturate more or desaturate, a whole bunch of different options. So you can see we've really got a lot more power now to start playing around with exactly how we want our game to look and how you can get a really distinctive look for your game and that's something that's going to set your game apart from others. Okay, so that's our global look done. Why don't we have a fly through and see how we're going? Oh, that looks nice and warm. The kitchen's looking okay. But then, oh my goodness, I've overdone the bloom, right? So we need to fix that, right? So I'm kind of happy with this room. You know, the plant's looking nice and drab, but everything else is looking nice and colourful, right? Exactly the look I was after. But I want to fix the kitchen up because I don't want to tone down the bloom on my living room. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to this kitchen volume here, and we're going to start playing around with this. So let's get a good viewpoint maybe where that table was blowing out. There we go. So this volume goes around this room, and so what I need to do is I need to go to Add Component, Rendering, and add a volume. This one's not global, but I'm going to make the priority 1, so it's going to take precedence over the global profile, which is on 0. And I'm going to create a new profile in here. Again, this could be a new profile. I could have dragged one in here if I already had a profile that I really liked, but we're starting from scratch here. And the first thing I'm going to do here is add an effect, and I'm going to add the bloom effect. So again, just to emphasize that we're overriding here, bloom is on when we come into this room. And what I want to do is I want to click on intensity and just set it to 0. And it will then should wipe out the bloom. Although, oh, I know what I haven't done. I'm going to just turn off that bloom for a second to sort of the surprise. What I'm doing here is I'm looking through the scene camera, okay? Now, if you remember, when I go to the main camera, when I've put in my post-processing layer, I've said the trigger, the time when you change between profiles is the main camera. Well, the main camera is just where I left it, right? So that's why we're still seeing that bloom on the camera. The main camera is still over in the living room somewhere, or the bedroom, or wherever it is. So I need to bring the main camera in here to actually see the effect of this profile. So I've got the scene view exactly where I like it. So now all I have to do is click the main camera and select it, and go to Game Object and say Align with View. So now it's brought the main camera in there and put it in exactly the same position. which means when I go back to my kitchen profile, I can turn on bloom again, turn on the intensity 0, so it's just turn bloom right off. So
Is that leaving other settings alone?
that's right. So you could potentially have some other settings within bloom that are on, and yeah. So you need to be, if you might want to do a whole block or decide you just want to affect one parameter or not. Again, this is slightly more complicated than version 1. Version 1, there's no thing as overrides. You just put your effect on and you just change all these parameters and you're done. This is just really a concept of version 2 where you start overriding parameters. One other thing I want to change here in the post-processing volume is, as I said, it's not global, but the blend distance is 0, which means as the trigger goes from 1 into this volume, it's going to instantly snap to this. I don't want it to happen, so maybe I'll give it a blend distance of, say, 3 units. So as it gets within 3 units of the edge of that volume, it will start to blend in. Let's see if we do that. So you can see there's still a bit of bloom here because we're still in the global profile. And as we go into the kitchen, we're going to blend into that profile. And then as we get to our trouble spot, there's no blowout because we don't have any bloom. We still have the same other effects though that are happening. And now as we move out of the kitchen, our bloom will come back on again. We'll start to see this come up here. And again, we're all good. So that's the basic principle of version 2. What I'd like to do just for the next few minutes is show you just some of the other effects and what we can do with them, because they're kind of fun to play around with. Again, I'm not you know, I come from a programming background, so this is kind of new to me, but they're kind of fun to play around with. Let's and so that's my you know, declaration that this next room is going to be looking really weird. All right, so just bear with me here. So I've got into the den. Before I go into the den, let's have a look at the den area. So what this is the den in the hallway. So I've got a cube around the den, and I've also got something around the hallway. So these volumes don't have to be square. It could be a mesh if you really wanted to go that far. You can construct them out of multiple parts. You just want to construct some volume that you're working with. Whatever suits. So let's go back to a nice view of the den. Again, I'll bring the main camera in by selecting it. Game object, align with view. Now, let's just add, I've selected the den in the hallway volume, and I'm going to go to rendering and add the volume there. So we can see it's actually made it green for us so we can see what we're dealing with. You can see the volumes that exist and which one we're using. I'll add a new profile. Let's put this is kind of a small room. It's a blend distance is a little bit tricky on this one. This has been brought up for me before. If you've got something like this with a hallway which is quite small, what do I put for a blend distance? Because if it's too much, as the camera flies through the living room, it kind of gets close to the edge of the hallway. It'll actually start to blend into the hallway thing. So that's something you have to play around with in your experience, is how do I do blend distances so I don't start getting profiles blending in when I don't want them to, and also don't get sudden snaps from one to the other. So I'll put a blend distance of 1 here, and I'm going to put a priority of 1 so it takes precedence over the global. So let's have a look at our effects list again. Well, the den's kind of, this dark kind of area. One thing I want to do here is add a vignette. I'm going to have to jump out here so you can see this in action. So we'll put a vignette on. Yeah, that's too much. Let's bring it back a little bit. You can see I'm a bit heavy-handed. We'll also add some grain. So I'll click on that and ramp that up to something silly just so you can see it come in. All right, so that's our moody den with the vignetting and the grain. Why don't we add a volume for our living room as well? So living room, add component, rendering, and add a volume. Now we're familiar with this now. We put a blend distance on of something. We'll up the priority a little bit. I know that text is pretty small. Let's zoom in a little bit on that. Create a new profile for it. Again, don't be confused that I'm adding effects in here. I'm actually editing the asset here. It's just a helpful interface so I don't have to go back to the asset and edit. So some people are confused by that. I'm not actually editing a component here. I'm actually editing an asset under the covers. It's just provided an easy way for me to do that. Let's add, on this one, let's add some auto exposure. This is an interesting one. So I'll zoom out here. I've still got that terrible grain on, so I need to move my main camera in here. So, so I've added this auto exposure. So I'll put a minimum and a maximum and a key value one. So this is going to change the exposure of my shot based on the luminance of different pixels within that. So it finds the maximum and the minimum luminance and does an average to adjust exposure on this shot. So this can be if you're having lights coming through, it will automatically darken everything else to compensate for it. So I'll just bump the minimum down a little bit and the maximum, and I'll bump the key value down. The higher the key value, the more it will auto expose. So let's just turn this off and on so you can see the result. It's a bit hard on projector, but you can kind of see this brightens everything up a little bit. And then one more fly through just to kind of see everything in action. So we're going to go through our hallway now, so you'll expect to see some grain come in. We come into our kitchen. I could have done more with the kitchen actually. I might go back and, that's still grainy, isn't it? The kitchen, maybe I would reduce the color temperature for that to make it stand out. So I come in here, plants desaturated. I kicked into the wall for the hallway there. Do you see that? And that's the problem I was talking about. And the grain came in because of my blend distances or where the camera was tracking. And now I have this over the top effect at the end. You can start to see how you can start to piece all this together. Does anyone have any questions on that? Yes, Murray.
I was just wondering, you had the different on-off values. Like
Yep.
if you had an option screen, would you say if they turn blue off, would you do it on one or the other of the on-off?
Right, that's really interesting. So could you actually put a customized menu in your game that actually switches these things on and off? I'm sure there is a way. I mean, you could programmatically get to that. I don't know what is off the top of my head, but most things in Unity you can access through code. Yeah. Yes.
Will this work with something like your asset pack, camera filter effects, things like that?
So if you've gone to the asset store and you've bought existing full screen effects,
Yeah.
It would work if you put them on first and then had this one go afterwards. So you may get away with that, but often with effects you need to have them happen in the right order. Depends on your rendering a little bit as well. So if you've got HDR rendering, then this is what brings it down to a final low definition output as well. So ordering is really important for full screen effects, I suppose is what I'm saying. So you may find you get something from the asset store and you put it first and it still looks okay or still looks fine. But if it's something that should happen at the end of that pipeline, then maybe not. So your best bet is to find custom effects or to transfer those into be custom effects. I mean, try it out by all means, but I think it's going to be a case-by-case basis. Yeah.
Notice there's a bit of snapping between the effect.
Wow. Yeah. Snapping between the effects.
Yeah.
It could be because I forgot to put a blend distance on one of the volumes. I'm not really sure. We can start it again and look out for it. So like I said, it's in beta. So we get some grain coming on in here. And so blend distance is wrong here because this grain should be coming off straight away. But yeah, it could be. It could be that there's some snapping, or it could be that I've forgotten to put a blend distance on. Yeah.
That must have been whatever was going on.
Oh, maybe the big glitch we saw there. I'm not really sure. Yeah. Anyone else got any questions?
Your light
Yeah.
through the window has got quadrate is like
Right.
single lights.
Yes.
Is that a feature I've missed?
No, this is just part of this asset pack that we
So
downloaded.
The physical shadows just
I actually haven't looked at the technique they're using here,
Okay.
so I don't know. Yeah, but it's not an inbuilt feature as yet. Yeah. Did it snap? Yeah, not sure. Anyone else got any questions?
Are there any improvements in efficiency in version 2?
Over version 1?
Yeah.
I don't imagine so. I don't think there's been any, not that I'm aware of. Has there been efficiency issues in version 1 that you found?
I thought because we tried that and we tried a few alternative sort of ones to try and find ones that were efficient, especially for WebGL.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think at the moment we just turn the whole thing off for WebGL.
right.
All the post-processing.
I mean, that's an important point, is that full screens and effects are expensive, full stop. And so you still can't just go apply these wherever you want, even though it should be one of the more efficient implementations. It's not something you'd necessarily do on mobile, for instance, or even necessarily in VR. Yeah, but yeah, I'm not sure exactly what efficiency improvements have been made. Anyone else? All right, awesome. So I've been super quick today, so we get some more chat time anyway. There's only one thing else to ask is, really love it if you could fill out a survey for me. It's 11 questions, take you a few minutes. I'll put the link up. It really is just for, helps me know how the events are going and so I can make it better for you next time. So it's really how I get, the only way I get feedback from you guys. So please take that. So just in summary, we will send you an email after the event with links to resources, links to that first lighting project, videos you can watch, the cheat sheets for the lighting modes, where you can get the post-processing stacks, all that kind of stuff. So expect that in the next couple of days. Yes?
Is the scene with the lighting example, is that on the asset store or as well, or would you say?
I will just, as far as I know, that's not publicly available because it uses assets from a paid-for asset pack.
Oh, not the architect, the one with the cars?
Yeah, that,
Oh, that one.
I'm not allowed to share that one either, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Sorry.
If you just want a fully real-time lighting scene,
Yeah,
with totally dynamic lights that might turn on or off or move,
yeah.
what's the best settings to do that? Because I do get, that table looks good to me, I can look at that.
Yeah.
But would you just set all your lights to real time?
If you wanted something fully real time,
Yeah.
well, you can definitely turn things to real time, but then the question is, what do you do with indirect? And it's either you light probe or you bake it. So they're the two options.